this essentially is identifying a very simple bar pattern, for the lack of a better term. Right? It's a single bar pattern here, mixed with one other condition here. All right. So this is for a Heiken Ashi chart, right? And we're also going to use a 50 EMA there. So, all right. So what this trader wants to identify are when two candles are touching the EMA, and we can actually see I've marked up on my chart here. So where the squares are, or the rectangles, right? We can see we have at least two bars, sometimes more, that are touching the EMA 50. All right, so it should be pretty obvious here that the white line is the EMA 50. All right, so then the next step to actually generate a signal, right, is a few bars later. Right, so this could take a couple of bars later here. All right, so we want the candle to close. Right, so the calculate is set to on bar close, and we're looking for a candle without a wick on the bottom. Right, so that would be for a long. Right, and I have some of these candles here marked with the green and red arrows. Right, so there we have it. So we can see we have a candle above the EMA and no wick. Right, so there you go, another candle with no wick on the bottom, right, above the EMA. And prior to it, we had a couple of candles, right, touching the EMA, and vice versa, the short end. Right, so a couple of candles touching the EMA, and then a second bar later, right, we have a down bar with no wick. All right, so yeah, that's it. Pretty straightforward. All right, so let's get BloodHound open. All right, anyway, something like that. So there you go, Heiken Ashi, 2-bar EMA touch, and then we're looking for a no-wick bar afterwards. Let's see. All right, we'll start with the first requirement here. So really, I guess you could break this down like so. You could say this is 2B, really. All right, so 2A or 2. Actually, let's just call it number 3. There. All right, so first condition, right? So we need 2 candles touching that EMA. All right. So what we're doing is we're comparing, right, the bar prices to that moving average, right? So for a bar to touch a moving average, obviously you need the low price of the bar, and grab that arrow, right? You need the low price, obviously lower than the EMA, and you also need the high price above the EMA, right? So those two conditions, identify a bar is touching some moving average. All right, so let's see, let's connect that in, and we can do that all with one solver here. All right, so high greater than EMA, all right, and low, that's a little complicated. Let's just say bar touching EMA 50. There we go. All right. So input A, that's going to be the bar high and the bar low. So let's set the type to price. All right. So we'll generate a long output when the high is above the EMA. That's kind of a standard, charting condition for trading. And then for a short output, we'll check to make sure that the low price, right, is below the EMA. And so input B needs to be that EMA. All right, we'll get the EMA typed in there. And there we are. EMA. Let's change the period to 50. There we go. All right. So what do we have on the chart? All right. So obviously, whenever these bar high prices, we get this out of the way, right? Whenever those bar highs are above, right, we're having a long output. And of course, whenever the low prices are underneath the EMA, right, we get a short output. So what are we looking for? We're looking for when we get a long and a short output together, right? So what we need to do here is we're going to use a function node to filter those bars that have a long and a short output together. And we want the long short modifier. All right, so we only want to see the bars with a long and short together. All right, so we want to strip out, the bars that have a long only, right, or a short only output. So we can use the long short modifier to do that. And we're going to use the product there. All right, so product is multiplication. So you multiply the long output by the short output. Right, and there we have it. So there's all the bars touching that EMA with a long and short output. All right. So if a bar is touching a moving average or touching something, right, that's a non-directional condition, right? So that doesn't tell you if you should be going long or you should be going short. So you actually want to have a long and short output for this specific condition, right? So any non-directional condition you're looking for. Another example would be volume, right? Whenever you're incorporating volume, right? Volume doesn't tell you whether the market's going up or down. It's non-directional. So when you're using volume type, volume within your condition, you typically, 99% of the time, you want a long and a short output at the same time. All right. So some of the other conditions are going to identify the actual trade direction, right? So so we're actually going to use the fact that the bar is above the EMA when we get that no-wick bar, or the bar has to be below the EMA when there's no wick bar, right? And that's going to determine the actual trade direction. Yeah. All right, let's move that off to the side. So now we need, actually, look at this. There we go. See, BloodHound's a lot better at identifying things than us humans are. So I actually missed that one bar there because that wick was just barely touching the EMA. So there we go. Got that corrected. So yeah, all right. Next thing is, so we need to take this first condition and extend it forward in time until we get that no-wick bar, right? Because we don't know how many bars it's going to take, right? Right here, it only took one bar. But all of these other three examples here, it took 2 bars. And, the explanation here is that, sometimes it can take several bars, right? Understandable. So we're going to add a signal extender here to this. And the signal extender allows us to determine, all right, how long does the market have, to generate one of these bars here. And just kind of, from a quick glance here, it doesn't, looks like it only takes maybe 3 bars. All these examples only take 2 bars. I don't know, maybe it takes 3 bars. So I'm going to set this to 3 bars there. All right. And let's also update the name on this. There. All right, so for now, we're just extending for 3 bars. There we go. All right, so now, we can see. So the racing stripes that we're seeing is showing us, the opportunity at which a no-wick bar can show up and get a signal. So the next step is to identify this no-wick bar. So, all right, that is where we're now going to start needing an AND node so we can start combining these conditions together. So, all right. Let's see. Actually, yeah. Let's just jump to the no-wick bar here next. So how do we identify if a bar has no wick? Again, right, it's a simple comparison. So if the low equals the open, then we know that there's no lower wick, right? And that's true for an up bar. It's also true for a down bar, right? If the high equals the open, then we know there's no upper wick, at least for a down bar, right? So let's compare the open. Let's see. So we want to know if the open equals, or actually, let's do this the other way around. Let's see if the low, right? So for a long signal, if the low equals the open, or for a short output, if the high equals the open. All right. So, all right, input A is going to be bar prices. Input B is also going to be bar prices. All right. So, for these long signals here, we're looking for the low to equal the open price. Right. So for a long output, we're going to be analyzing the low price, and we're going to check to see if it equals the open. And then, right, for these short signals, we're checking the high price and seeing if the high equals the open. All right, there we go, high price. And for input B, we're going to check to see if it equals the open. Now we need to make sure that we have an equal condition here. So we're going to open up the comparison settings. And we want to use the low equals the open. Obviously the low is not going to be greater than the open, unless somebody programmed the bars incorrectly, which I have seen that in times past. So, all right, both the same. So if the high equals the open, right, we're using that as our condition for a short output, right? For a long output or a long signal, we're looking to see if the low equals the open, like so. And there we have it. So actually we can see, right, it's identifying all kinds of bars here, right, with no wick at the top and no wick at the bottom, right, and we're getting the appropriate output. So let's just see, and I'm just going to kind of scan through here and see if maybe every once in a while the Heiken Ashi gives us a really wonky bar where we might get a long output because there's no wick on the top. I mean, technically that should be impossible, but you should always look and look for these weird things that shouldn't happen, because they can and they will. Yeah, so this quick scan, everything does look good. So it looks like whenever there's a short output, it's always a down bar. Yeah, and all the long outputs are always on an up bar. Okay, I think this works great. So let's connect that in there. There we go. Let's go back to our little work area. There. Yeah. So you notice how we have a signal on bars that are touching, right? Yeah, bars are touching, and we have a signal there. So we need to actually go and correct that. All right, and that's because of this condition here. Let me zoom out a little bit. There. Right, so when we're identifying the bars touching the EMA, we actually don't want a signal on those bars, right? The signal has to come afterwards. So we need to take those signals and shift them forward in time here. Right, so if we look at this solver here, there's a couple of ways I can do this. So I can actually adjust the solver settings here. Actually, you know what? Because this spot here is working out so perfectly, it was easy to kind of overlook something like this. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah, there we go. So, right, sometimes you might get just one bar. Although, interesting enough, there actually was no No-Wick bar. So that's a bad example. Here we go. We got one bar touching, and then we have a No-Wick bar. And that would have generated a signal, but we needed 2 bars here. So that was overlooked. All right. So what we need to do is make sure that there's at least 2 bars touching that EMA, not just a single bar. So we're gonna interject here. And what we need is a, let's see here. We could use, function node. We could use a signal counter, but that's kind of overkill here. Right, this is simple. So let's just use the lookback node. That's a lot easier to set up. And the lookback gives us another functionality here that we need, which is this displacement function here. All right. So with the look back, I'll set the displacement to 0 for now. Right. So with the look back, right, we want to eliminate that output and that output, right? Because it's only a single bar touching. We want to get rid of those. So with the look back, we can use the look back period here, and we need at least 2 bars there. And then the mode will become visible. And so we need a minimum of 2 bars. Right? And there we go. So that cleared out these single bar touches here. So there we go. And so like right here, we have 3 bars touching. So when the first bar touches, right, there's no output because we need at least 2 bars. So once we get to the second bar, now we've identified, okay, yeah, we now at least have 2 bars touching. And then of course we get to the third bar, and so yeah, we have a 3rd bar touching. All right. And let's see here. So now we're going to use the displacement. All right, yeah, so the next thing I need to figure out here is, so if we have 3 bars touching, right, the third bar still has a signal on it, right? And we need to get this signal off of this bar that's touching, yeah, right, because look, this is a no-wick bar. So we don't want the signal here. We want the signal, oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, so we need to get a third condition added in here. You know, which is not a part of these instructions here. It's not written, but it's yeah, it's kind of it's implied by the screenshot, which I didn't show yet. So yeah, so there were some screenshots here provided here of some examples. All right, so you can see we have this purple EMA here, right, and so we can see we have a couple of bars touching, right? And then once the bars move off of the EMA, that's when we're looking for that no-wick bar. So here we go. So we have 2 bars touching the EMA, and then, you know, and then once the bars move off, there we go. So here we go. We have at least 3 bars touching, and then the bars move off. So yeah, so we need another condition which says, okay, now the bar may not be touching, so the bar must have moved off that EMA. Right. And so that will, right, that'll remove the signal off of the bars that are touching. Right. So let's connect that up. Like that, and see what we got here, right? Yeah, so there we go, right? So we need to remove that signal, and we need to remove, oops, wrong one, and there we go. And we need to remove the signal on that bar as well, because it's touching. So let's, yeah, so I think we can actually use this solver again here. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this solver onto the board again, right? So I have the same solver on here twice, but this solver is somewhat independent. Let's see. Yeah, I was thinking of inverting this, but you know what? Yeah, you know, a lot of times there's kind of 2 ways or 3 ways to kind of get to the same end result. And actually, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Instead, yeah. So really what we're looking for is we want to identify the bars opposite of the ones that are touching. Right? The bars that are opposite of the ones touching. So I could either use an inverter, or let's see if there's a function of the long-short modifier that I can use. Yeah, all right, so I think there is. So, all right, I'm going to copy this function node, drop it down here. Let's play around with this function node. And let's see. Yeah, there we go. So the difference provides, right, the opposite result. So we can see all these bars that are touching, right, have no output, and the bars that are not touching now have an output. Right. So I could use this, you know, or, you know, probably, you know, back in the, you know, previous days, I would have built another comparison solver. Right. So here's another way that you can do this: is you can say, all right, if the low of the bar is above our EMA, well, then we know that the bar is above it, right? And the bar is not touching. And vice versa, if the high of the bar is below our moving average, then we also know that the bar is not touching and it's below, right? So that's another way that we could do it. We could create that other comparison solver, or we can use this function node here. So, and again, so this function node is using the difference here, right? So difference means subtraction. So what's going on? Just a quick explanation, right? So when you get a long and a short on the same bar, right, you're taking the long output and subtracting it from the short output, right? So 1 minus 1 is 0. So that's why, right, the bars that have a long and a short equals 0 coming out of this function node, right? But the other bars, it would be a long output minus 0 for the short output. So 1 minus 0 is 1, and vice versa. So 1 for the short output minus 0 for the long output, right? So 1 minus 0 would be 1. So, but you know what? This is probably a little more confusing. So let's go ahead and actually make a new comparison solver here for this. Yeah. All right, so we want to know if the low is above the EMA or the high is below the EMA. Again, input A is going to be the bar prices. Input B, that's going to be our EMA 50 here. So for a long output, again, we're looking at the low price to make sure that the low is above the EMA. And so for a short output, we're looking at the high price, and we want to make sure the high is below the EMA. All right, so now input B, let's plug in the EMA. There we go. Put in the 50 period. And there we go. So the reason why I went with actually, making another, adding a new comparison solver here, is that, this visually, this makes a lot more sense to people, right? So obviously we are looking for short signals if the bars are underneath the EMA, right? And we're looking for long output, long signals if the bars are above the EMA. So that, that is a little more intuitive, to look at visually, versus that function node, which gave us a long and a short, which again would work because remember this guy here, this comparison solver, is doing our filtering, right? So it is giving us a long only when we have these up bars with no lower wick, right, and vice versa. So, but when you're, kind of building the system and you're debugging, having this solver here makes a little more intuitive sense. So let's connect that up and let's connect that in and let's see what we're left with. There we go. All right, so now the signals are only on bars that are not touching that EMA. Right? And of course, sometimes we're getting signals way afterwards. So let's check our signal extender here. Let's see, so we got one. All right, so we're gonna have to constrain, or actually we're gonna need to filter, better filter the signals going into the signal extender. And okay, I can use this as my example here. Right. So sometimes the signal going into the signal extender includes a bar that's touching, right? But to be more precise, right? So these bars in the future, could be several bar candles later, but this is supposed to be after the bars are not touching. So really, we need to take this output here and better filter it. And yeah, so we can add a AND node. Look at this AND node. And then connect that in there. And all right, so this is looking good. So what I'm seeing here is we now only have, right, we have an output when there's at least 2 bars touching the EMA. And let's see. So for example, right, this single bar, there's still no output on these single bars. So let's see, but all these areas here, we have at least 3 or more bars touching that EMA. Single bar. I want an example of just 2 bars. Let's see. All right, so here we go. So here's a couple examples of just 2 bars. Yeah, and there's no output here. So let's see here. I need to, let's do that. There we go. All right, so on this lookback node, I actually I had to pull remove the displacement off of this. So now we can see, so when we get 2 bars touching, there we go. We're getting, right, an output or a signal on the second bar telling us, okay, we at least have 2 bars, right? And of course here we have a whole mess of bars touching that EMA. So, and so remember, so when I was originally building this, I said we need to shift the signal that we have at least 2 bars touching. We need to shift it forward by at least 1 bar onto the bars where we actually want to see the signals, right? Because again, we don't want to see a signal when bars are touching, right? So for example, right, we wouldn't want to see a short signal here, right? There's no upper wick, but this bar is still touching. So we need to shift the signals forward there, and yeah. All right. It's always good to name these look back nodes so that you know what they're doing here, right? So this is looking for a 2 bar minimum of a signal coming out of this. It's looking for a 2 bar minimum. And let's see. Yeah, actually, there we go. All right, yep, there's our 2 bar minimum. All right, so what I needed was to actually separate the displacement from the 2 bar minimum, like so. Yeah, so this, we're going to use the displacement in a separate one here. Yeah, there we go. Let's see, no, that's still not working. All right, so this is a good lesson in kind of troubleshooting your logic here. So I can see I still have an output of these bars that are touching, right? And what I'm trying to get to is this. So this is working perfectly for when there's only 2 bars touching, right? 2 bars touching, and then that signal is on the next bar forward, right? Again, 2 bars touching, and the signal has been pushed forward onto the next bar, right? So it's right. So it's after the bars touching. That is when we want to see the signal that goes into the signal extender. So whenever there's only 2 bars, it's working, but when we get a bunch of bars, it's still not working. And okay, so I do need, I was on the right track, I do need this AND node, and there we go. All right, there we go. Right, so we have all these bars touching again. And let's go ahead and mark all these. Yeah, right. And then our signal is on the bar after they stop touching, right? We could also mark this, and I can actually consolidate this so I can go back, and put the displacement back into here. All right, let's just double check this again. There we go. So all these bars are touching, and there's no signal on the bars touching. All right, but this again, this is identifying, when the bars are touching, that we have at least 2 bars touching. So we can name this AND node here. There we go. Yeah, so here we go. We have 4 bars touching, right? And we have the signal afterwards. 3 bars, signal afterwards. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. 3 bars, signal afterwards. A 1 bar touch, right? Still removed. Okay, there we go. So that's what we're looking for. And then we can feed that into the signal extender. Right. So now we can see how many bars there's an opportunity for a no bar to show up and generate a signal. Right. So this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4 bars. So I can actually knock this down. Right, knock the signal extender down to 2 bars. There we go. So now we have a 3 bar opportunity. Right. Again, of course, this can be adjusted, as necessary. Just either increase the signal extending, or decrease the signal extending to determine, how many bars, how many bars are allowed for this no bar wick to show up. So now if we connect that up, right, there we go. Right, so since there are 3 bars allowed, right, sometimes you're going to get 2 bars with no wick. So therefore you're going to get 2 signals, right? So here's our three bars after the bars don't touch, right? And so we have 2 bars with no upper wick, so 2 signals. So now if we want to clean that up, we can add a signal blocker, like so. All right, and yeah, I think the most we need to block for is 2 bars. And let's check the resets here. We'll turn all the resets off. And so, let's see. The reset will be when there's, no signal. I'm not even sure that we need a reset here, but I'm just going to set a reset to no signal. There. And, all right, that should clean things up. So there we have it. All right, let me see if there's any follow-ups on this. And no, I don't see any follow-ups on this. All right, so just to kind of summarize, right, this is identifying, the bars that are touching, and it's also, hold on, and if we connect this up here, and it's also producing an output on the first bar where a signal can show up. Okay. So this is identifying, again, a minimum of 2 bars touching that EMA, and then shifting that, that signal that, yes, 2 bars are touching. It's then shifting that signal forward onto the first bar that is not touching, right? And so this is when the signals can occur, right? This is the first bar where the signals can occur. And then we use a signal extender, right? Because we want to give these Heiken Ashi bars, a couple of bars opportunity. Like right here's a good one here. Yeah, we can see right here, right? We have some up bars, but they have lower wicks, and it wasn't until the 3rd bar that there was a no-wick bar, right? So there you go. So that signal extender, extends the opportunity for a no bar to show up, right? So, and then this guy down here just adds a little filtering mechanism. So it is actually identifying the no-wick bars. Let's see. All right, Alwyn actually, this is a separate question here, but real quick to answer here. So I'll get this one done. So Alwyn's asking, can BloodHound make sounds? And yes, it can. Yep, if you just look in the properties of the BloodHound indicator. And let's see, let me just kind of clean up my chart here, get rid of all these drawing objects there. All right. Yeah, so if you go into the indicators window and take a look at your BloodHound settings, right there you go. There's a section here called signal alerts, and you can see one of them is play sounds. So there you go. And then you just need to plug in the sound, right, for long signals, and if you want a different sound for short signals.